In southern Spain, there is a piece of land that doesn't belong to the Spanish at all. This is Gibraltar, which is a British overseas territory. The official language is English, and the currency is the British pound. You have surely heard of the Rock of Gibraltar. This is the home of that massive feature, and one of the main reasons that people visit. I will show you that and much, much more over the next few minutes. Let's get to it.
I spent 2 nights in Gibraltar and devoted almost all of my time on that day in the middle to discovering the appeal of a visit to the Rock. I still didn't get a chance to see everything. My initial stop was not even on the Rock at all. For me, it was an early morning walk all the way along the length of the peninsula to Europa Point. What I found was a wild and windy spot that provided scenes of immense beauty. The rocky land stands as a seemingly immovable point jutting out into the water. Waves relentlessly drive against the solid base of the European continent. That collision produces explosions of sea and spray rising 40 or 50 feet into the air. The southernmost piece of Gibraltar is the site of spectacular nature on a large scale.
Many think that Europa Point is the southernmost spot in Europe, but that is not the case. It is still very significant though because of its position at the boundary of the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean.
To the west is the Strait of Gibraltar and the Atlantic Ocean. To the east is the Alboran Sea, which is part of the Mediterranean. From here, when the weather is good, it's possible to see Spain and the northern coast of Morocco. One of the more distinctive features of Europa Point is this lighthouse. This is referred to as the Trinity Lighthouse. It was constructed beginning in 1838 and completed in 1841. The entire life of this beacon has been spent guiding vessels between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic through the Strait of Gibraltar. It has been automated since 1994. Another building near the point captures the attention of everyone who passes. This is the Ibrahim Al-Ibrahim Mosque. It was a gift of the former king of Saudi Arabia. This stands as the southernmost mosque in Europe and one of the largest mosques in a non-Muslim country. It was opened here in 1997. Near the southern entrance to the area, which includes the upper reaches of the peninsula, is this viewpoint. It was created to recognize the mythological Pillars of Hercules. One of those pillars is the Rock of Gibraltar, and the other is a high point in northern Africa. There are actually 2 peaks that are candidates for that southern pillar. Regardless, the pillars form an entrance to the Strait of Gibraltar. Legend has it that Hercules, on his quest to perform his 12 labors, used his strength to break through a mountain connecting the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. For those touring the main sites of the peninsula, a lot of time will be spent in the Gibraltar Nature Reserve. Around 40% of the entire territory is protected by the reserve. It was established as a way to secure the natural elements, the wildlife, and the historical sites for future generations.
You go through the Gibraltar Nature Reserve to get to basically all of the sites that you want to see. That includes all of the attractions on the upper rock. The cost to get in is 25 British pounds. That converts to about 30 US dollars.
This sanctuary was created in 1993 as the Upper Rock Nature Reserve. Expansion has occurred through the years, and the name was changed to reflect that it protects more than just the highest reaches of the rock. The most famous inhabitants of Gibraltar and the Nature Reserve are not humans, but primates. These are the Barbary macaques, or Barbary apes. While exploring the territory, people encounter the macaques just about everywhere. These animals comprise the only colony of wild primates on the European continent. Calling them wild, though, is a bit misleading. Yes, they roam freely, but they are totally adapted to interacting with humans. Some seem perfectly tame. Barbary macaques are listed as an endangered species, and their numbers are declining overall. Gibraltar is one of the only places that the population is stable and even increasing. Somewhere between 200 to 300 of the apes call the peninsula home. While the cost to enter the nature reserve and see the attractions of the Upper Rock is around 30 US dollars, more money can be spent to avoid some steps. A cable car operates from the lower levels of Gibraltar up to near the highest points.
My timing could not have been worse in relation to the cable car. It shut down for annual maintenance on the day that I arrived. It didn't open again until after I left.
A round-trip cable car ride will add about $10 to the cost of admission for the reserve. There are several peaks on the spine of the rock at the top of Gibraltar. Going to any one of them provides astonishing views, including Europe, Africa, the Mediterranean, and the Atlantic. The absolute highest point on the peninsula is 426 meters above sea level, which is just shy of 1,400 feet. I went to one of the highest spots near the cable car line. This is what I found there.
There is really not a whole lot to see at this particular location. A few old buildings, some communication towers. The reason to come up here, though, is just to say I've been to the top of the rock.
The buildings and towers were not all that impressive. Climbing to one of the highest points, however, is not about just what's with you on the ground. It's about the views of all that surround you. Those views are remarkable. There are a number of features that those who visit should make an attempt to see. Possibly the most fantastic is St. Michael's Cave. The natural limestone cavern would be a treat on its own, but this experience includes lights and music. I was skeptical about the addition of those enhancements, but I must say that I enjoyed the show. This is one of more than 150 caves that are located within the rock. St. Michael's is by far the most visited, with more than 1 million people each year passing through the attraction. The space is massive, and it's so amazing to think about the fact that it was created by rainwater slowly seeping into the limestone and expanding the openings over time. The enjoyment of this does not belong solely to modern humans, as prehistoric cave art has been found, as well as a couple of skulls of Neanderthals. Our ancestors may have first entered the cave 35,000 years ago. An experience designed to get the heart rate up can be found at the Skywalk. As should be expected, the views at this location rival any of those seen at the rock. What makes this unique, though, is that it is possible to walk onto a platform made of laminated glass. That platform extends away from the cliff and gives a chance to see several hundred meters straight down to the rocks below. It might not be for those who have a fear of heights. Experts promise it is perfectly safe. With the capacity to support 340 people, only 50 can walk on the structure at any one time. There are 4 layers of glass, and the platform is more than 4 centimeters thick. Possibly my favorite place on the Upper Rock was here. This is the Windsor Suspension Bridge. It's possible to experience this in a couple of ways. Stay on the trail with solid footing underneath, and the full extent of the bridge can be viewed with the city and the water behind it. Crossing the span, however, is the way this should be enjoyed.
This is the least visited attraction that I've seen on the Upper Rock. It's a little out of the way, but not difficult to reach at all. It has a little sway, a little bounce, everything you want in a suspension bridge. And the views, like everything else on the rock, pretty spectacular.
This bridge is 71 meters from end to end, and it crosses a small gorge that is around 50 meters deep. I was in this location for 15 minutes or more, and only a handful of other people came along to tackle the crossing. This has been part of the landscape only since 2016. I mentioned that there are 150 caves within the rock, but that's not the only way to go underground. There are 34 miles, or 55 kilometers, of tunnels. That's over a land area that is only 2.6 square miles. Accessing a portion of those tunnels comes with the paid admission to the reserve. This is the area of the Great Siege tunnels. Those tunnels ran for several hundred meters and had openings toward the northeast. The Great Siege began in 1779 and continued until 1783. The French and Spanish faced off against the British in a failed attempt to claim Gibraltar during the time of the American Revolution. Built by hand with sledgehammers, crowbars, and gunpowder blasts, the tunnels were constructed to get guns into position to cover a blind spot for the British military. 7 big guns were placed here in St. George's Hall. Walking through the tunnels is such a kick for history buffs. The number and total length of tunnels increased immensely during World War II. Today, a part of those tunnels is open to the public. This is being turned into a cool-looking museum with some of the exhibits not yet finished when I visited. Gibraltar was seen as a key during the war, and a large number of Allied troops were stationed here. Tunnels were expanded to hold the soldiers, food, ammunition, and more. The entirety of a 16,000-person garrison could be housed in the tunnels with provisions to last them 16 months. This attraction promises to be very special when it is completed. Possibly the oldest point of interest in Gibraltar is the Moorish Castle. Construction began on this complex in the early 8th century. The Moors actually controlled the peninsula for a time that exceeded 700 years. This tower of homage is the most prominent feature of the complex. It's visible from much of the surrounding area. There are also inside passages, gates, and fortified walls that increase the appeal of making a stop. A portion of the castle was home to the Gibraltar prison until that was relocated in 2010. An astonishing amount of history in one spot. There is a sweet little viewpoint at Princess Caroline's Battery. That's not far from the Moorish Castle. It was put together in 1732 and used during the Great Siege. Sitting at a crossroads, today it sees plenty of tourists. There is plenty more to Gibraltar outside of the nature reserve. You'll see one of the most interesting features at the very moment that you arrive at the peninsula.
This is undoubtedly the strangest walk ever from a bus station into the heart of town. It is totally wild to realize that right now I'm in the middle of an active runway.
The bus station and passport control coming in from Spain is on the northern side of the international airport. Many people simply walk the short distance into town. Those first steps are directly across the runway. It is so unique to see the green walk signal and have the ability to stroll from one side of the field to the other. A tunnel now allows vehicles to pass under the runway. Pedestrians can use that tunnel too, but where's the fun in that? This would always be my preferred method of entering or exiting the city. Pedestrians do go through a tunnel before entering the main part of the town of Gibraltar. This is the Landport Tunnel, which was once the only land-based entrance to the peninsula. No one is sure, but it's likely that this gateway was established in the very early 16th century. When the city was fortified, this was heavily guarded. There was even a moat and a drawbridge at this location. Portions of the old city walls remain intact near the Landport entrance. Passing through this corridor is a clear indication that there will be plenty of history on the peninsula. Just on the south side of the Landport Tunnel is the main square of the city. This is called Casemates Square. It holds numerous pubs, bars, and restaurants, as well as places to do a little shopping. Once used by the military and home to bomb-proof barracks, Casemates was also the site for public executions back in the day. It has a much more pleasant atmosphere today and is used for celebrations of all types. There are some reminders of the past here. Another tunnel entrance to the northwest exists too. This was the site of the old Waterport Gate. Going beyond Casemates Square, there is Main Street. This is a pedestrian avenue lined with shops and eateries of all sorts. It extends for 1 kilometer and is a comfortable place to wander and see what you can find. Most of the tourist activity takes place here or within 2 or 3 blocks to either side. At the southern end of Main Street, there are 3 gates. The largest is Referendum Gate, and it was built only in 1967. The Southport gates are much older. One of these openings was built in 1552, and the other in 1883. Here, it's also possible to see part of the Charles V Wall. That dates to the 16th century and protected the approach to the city from the south. Back on Main Street is the most significant church in Gibraltar. This is the Cathedral of St. Mary the Crowned. The Catholic Church was founded here in 1462. Originally, a mosque was converted, but ultimately the new building was erected in the Gothic style. I was able to appreciate the structure on both the inside and the outside. Just outside of the southern walls is the Trafalgar Cemetery. Primarily, those buried here were members of the military. Ironically, though, only 2 of the graves belong to victims of the naval battle of Trafalgar. Most of the rest died in other battles at other times. Some were victims of yellow fever outbreaks. The cemetery was in a state of disrepair until the 1980s. It was restored and is now a place of honor once again. This is the Gibraltar Botanical Gardens, also known as the Alameda Gardens. There are numerous native species of plants within the grounds. This place is very well established, as it was created in 1816, over 200 years ago. Natural beauty is abundant in this location, and there is plenty of room to find your own space. The site covers 15 acres. Being Gibraltar, there are so many British pubs here, but I found refreshment at a place called My Wines. It was not only an attractive spot to sit and have a drink, but it also produced its own beers.
When I stopped by, they only had a couple of their beers available, but this is a pastry stout, and at 10%, it is incredibly flavorful.
Wine is what they are known for here, but I think their beer might be overlooked. Having a pint here with my brother was a great way to end my time on the peninsula. It allowed a moment to reflect on so much: the unique walk across the runway into the city, the feeling of being at the end of the earth at Europa Point, the prevalence of multitudes of Barbary macaques, and just the ability to spend time on the Rock of Gibraltar, a place I first learned of long ago. I am so fortunate.
There is beauty here and just a ton of history. At the mouth of the Mediterranean Sea, this has been a significant point of land through the ages. It has been a pleasure spending just a little bit of time here, getting to know the place. This stop in Gibraltar was part of a multi-day excursion. The next leg of the trip is to cross the water and spend a few days in Morocco on the northern edge of Africa. Stay tuned to Old, Alone, and Far From Home. You don't want to miss any of the content from this part of the world.